Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a very special video because this is going to be a top 35 most powerful vintage masculine targeted fragrance video. I'm going to do a separate powerful women's targeted fragrance video, and then finally I'm going to do a powerful designer, kind of the ones that got left out. Like I'm instantly thinking about Dior Homme Parfum, which lasts forever and a day on my skin, stuff like that that didn't make the cut. But let's do scent of the day. And just a reminder, I already did a top 25. I probably could have made it 35, but just based on the fragrances in my collection, you know, each list is going to be a little bit of a different size. But I already did a top 25 most powerful niche fragrances in my collection, and this is my scent of the day, Promise. Somebody asked me the other day to show them my spraying routine. So here you go. I'll usually go something like that, which is probably more than enough for Promise, but fuck it, I'm the Ram, so let's go. And then I'll usually do something like that on the back of the hand so I can see how it breaks down. And whenever I decide to reapply, which yes, I will reapply, Promise, I give zero fucks, it will go on the right hand. And then that way I can still get the dry down and the newer spray. Now, there is a very funny reason as to why I'm wearing this as my scent of the day today. So I'll usually get, let's say, at least 2 wears out of jeans before I wash them. Shirts, I'm a 1-wear kind of guy. 1 wear, they go in the wash. Jeans, I can usually swing, let's say, two or three wears, depending on where I go. Like last time I wore these jeans I'm wearing today, I stayed in the house, okay? So I didn't go anywhere. I stayed in. It rained. It was exactly the last weekend, last Sunday, whenever I did my 25 most powerful niche fragrance video. Well, the reason I bring that up is literally from tucking in my undershirt, which I don't have an undershirt on today, but from tucking in my undershirt, and even after the fragrance dried, even after Promise dried, just to give you an idea of how powerful Promise is, I could literally smell it on the inside of the waistband of my jeans a week today when I was going to wear them. And I was like, I have to wear Promise today because I literally smell like Promise. In fact, I didn't even have to apply a fragrance today. I could have smelled Promise radiating from the waistband of my jeans, from the back of my hand, touching the inside after tucking my shirt in. That's how powerful some of these ambery, woody materials have become in the modern day, okay, in the modern day. And in the vintage day, even though many people call a lot of these fragrances we're going to talk about today powerhouse fragrances, and it's true, I mean, they are powerhouses in one sense or another, but the reality of the situation is they don't come anywhere near the tenacity of some of the materials that are being used today. I swear to God, this is a true statement. There is a jacket that I accidentally got some Promise on a year or two ago, and 3 months later, when I pulled the jacket out, I could smell it on the jacket. 3 months, I could smell it. I'm not kidding. It is that powerful. So you're not going to see stuff, and I do love Promise. I'm not going to lie. I love a big give zero fucks perfume. It's just the kind of guy I am. You have to know who you are. You have to know yourself, and that's exactly who I am. So you won't see that kind of power with these vintage fragrances. Also, every single one of these is marketed towards men, okay? Whether you believe the marketing is up to you, but every single one of these is marketed towards men, number one. And number two, every single one of them is vintage in the sense that they are pre-2000, let's say, okay? A lot of these are from the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of my all-time favorite fragrances on this list because if you know me, you know I love big, powerful fragrances. So it's a top 35. Let's go. So before we get started, though, we're going to do an honorable mention. And the reason we're going to do an honorable mention is I wanted to keep it in increments of 5. I didn't want to do a top 36, but this easily could have been on the list. The honorable mention ended up being Fendi Uomo from 1988. And the reason this ended up being an honorable mention is it is a child of Trussardi Uomo, which came out in 1983. Trussardi Uomo is like the OG, the granddaddy of this style of sort of Italian, spicy, leathery, earthy type fragrances that use a lot of this fresh spice where it smells like you're a little child in your grandmother's kitchen smelling her open the cabinet. You know, there's a lot of marjoram, coriander, angelica. There's a beautiful lavender in here. You know what? We're going to do sprays today because it's a weekend. My Mavs are playing today. Hopefully they don't get blown out like they did last game. But let's spray. Not that I'll be able to smell anything with Promise anyways. I'll probably only be able to smell Promise, but let's spray. Fendi Uomo. Good old Fendi Uomo. Let's see what we're dealing with here. I love this stuff. I still need to review this. This is on the to review list. So this is the honorable mention. Oh yeah, I mean dry, spicy. The Angelica makes it feel slightly greener than Trussardi Uomo in the beginning, but you still get that smooth, creamy lavender. There's some iris mixing with the leather later on. It's like a castoreum leather. My kind of fragrance through and through. So beautiful. And the bottle is just like, I mean, just huge. Look at the marble. So 80s, so beautiful. I love this. Is definitely my type of fragrance. So honorable mention is Fendi Uomo. Okay. So number one, and again, these are unranked, by the way, so don't worry about the ranking. I did save what I would consider two of the most powerful ones for the end, three of the most powerful ones for the end, but this is unranked, okay? If it was ranked, I would be showing them in a different fashion, but just since there is some connection between Fendi Uomo and Trussardi Uomo, number one on the list is Trussardi Uomo. And I've got a couple different bottles of this. I have one that says Selective Beauty on the bottom, and I have one that says Scannin on the bottom. I think this came from the Duck Den. I think this came from Rich Mitch. And Trussardi Uomo is, well, I've got an entire review on it, so you can go check it out. But it is, I think, one of the greatest fragrances from the Italian side of the pond, for me personally. Trussardi Uomo could easily be like a signature scent for me. And it was created by Beatrice Piquet, who also created Lidge, L'Instant de Guerlain, which I absolutely love Lidge, and I love Trussardi Uomo. These are her two greatest creations as far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, I mean, instantly you can see this goes a little bit more spicy in the beginning, whereas Fendi Uomo uses that Angelica in a way that gives it this green pop, you know, it's a little greener. Also, I think the lavender comes through a little bit quicker here. Sometimes you can sense lavender more than you can smell it. You know what I mean? Yeah, here it focuses more on the spices. You can definitely tell Trussardi Uomo was an inspiration for Fendi Uomo, but they both last forever. They're both amazing. I mean, just the type of perfumery that I love to wear in the crazy world that we're going through right now. I love wearing these vintage fragrances, so while everyone else is wearing Ariana Grande Cloud, or whatever the hell they're wearing out and about, I would much prefer to be smelling like this. So Trussardi Uomo at number one. Number two is one of my favorite honey fragrances of all time. This is Hugo Boss. Now it was called just Hugo Boss Boss because it was their first fragrance for men. And actually, I think their first fragrance. I don't think Boss started doing women's fragrances until much later. They focused on the men's side, which I dig. And so Hugo Boss turned into Boss number one because it was the first fragrance, but the earlier bottles won't say number one on there. And if you can find a bottle that looks like this, even if it says number one, go for it. You're probably just fine. But I love this stuff. There's a full review, like I said, on the channel. I really don't need to be spraying these, but just for the video, Hugo Boss number one is this pissy, masculine honey that I've got multiple bottles of this, but oh man, this is so fucking good. This is like, you know, as far as like signature scents for me, this could be a Ram signature scent. Oh, it's so good. That pissy honey opening. Someone was like, Ramsey, pissy honey is not good. And I was like, yes, it is. Pissy honey is absolutely good. It's cut with green notes like basil and green apple, which I think that green apple ended up morphing into Boss Bottled, which was like a gift and a curse, you know, for Boss, because all they started to do was million flankers of Boss Bottled, and, you know, that sweet apple pie is not my thing. I much prefer the first three releases from Hugo Boss. I mean, they started out of the gate like they were going to be one of the greatest fragrance companies ever. And they started, I mean, the first three fragrances they released, Hugo Boss number one, Boss Sport, and Boss Spirit, which is also on this list next, just started out like wildfire. And then it's like they just hit a wall. And I think Boss Bottled was like one of the worst things that's ever happened to this company. But I've got an entire review. You can check it out. It dries down to this beautiful tobacco, but it stays animalic. It has character. The honey adds this animalic side to it. I love animalic honey. And the 80s was like the animalic honey decade. Oh man, Boss number one. Fuck. This is, I mean, if I was going to wear like a three-piece suit and I had to go somewhere extremely important and I wanted to put something on that kind of put me in the mood of being the alpha in the room, that's what I would be wearing. I love Hugo Boss number one. It's professional while still having that edge. You know, it tells people a little bit about your personality. It tells them you're not a sheep. You know, you're not a follower. So I love Hugo Boss number one. Okay, number three on the list, staying with the House of Hugo Boss, we have Boss Spirit. And the atomizer on this one's a little wonky, so I'm not going to try and spray this because I decanted it into a better atomizer that I've been using. And then when it's gone, I'll decant some more. But yeah, Boss Spirit, there's a review. I had a mini, and the mini was so good I had to go get myself a bottle. Boss Spirit is 1989 release. Unfortunately, it's like the final release where I think Boss was killing it. Some people would add Boss Elements to the list, but I think Elements was kind of already on the downslope for them. Spirit, though, has spirit. I mean, Chris from Scentland calls this sunshine in a bottle. And you know what? It's interesting because it may have that effect on him, and I could see where he's going with it because of the sort of brightness of it, but it starts extremely green. It's actually one of the greenest openings I've ever smelled, but it's like a dirty green. So it's mugwort, galbanum, tarragon, peppermint, green notes, and aldehydes, and they all come together to almost give this marijuana-like smell, like a deep green marijuana bud, you know? But that ends up going away. There's tarragon in the top and tarragon in the heart, so it has that sharpness. The spices here start very, very sharp and green, okay? Extremely green, like shockingly green. And then all of a sudden, it dries down to this dirty leather. There's hints of sandalwood, amber, and patchouli in the base. There's geranium. There's lavender. Again, you could consider this easily to be worn on a suit, but it has kind of a similar character. They don't smell the same, but Boss number one and Boss Spirit kind of make me feel the same, you know, like a man who has his own character. And literally the advertisement for this is when you are your own boss. And it's like a man and a woman dancing in the street while their car was like broken down with smoke coming out from behind them. The good old days of advertising. So yes, Boss Spirit comes in at number three. Number four is the one that I just reviewed on the channel a couple days ago, and it's from the house of MCM, Mode Creation Munich, and it is called Success. So Success is one of my favorite honey fragrance. I just mentioned two of my all-time favorite honey fragrances, Boss number one and MCM Success. My God, man, this is so good. I don't even have to spray it because I just wore it. Success it's Success. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Pacoma Gatsby. It doesn't have as pissy vibe of the honey, but the honey opens up spicy. The tobacco feels so textured. Everything in this feels so deep and rich and three-dimensional, and resinous, you know? There's like a resinous aspect to it. The patchouli grounds the fragrance down. There's some vetiver, carnation, but there's honey in the top and honey in the base. You can go watch my review of this. You can go watch my review of Pacoma Gatsby. It'll kind of get you in the same ballpark. But this came out 1 year after Hugo Boss number one, and I have no doubt that Hugo Boss number one highly motivated MCM to release a fragrance like this. I would love to know who the perfumer is, by the way, but we do not know that. So that is number four, MCM Success. Number five is an old school leathery chypre with a pretty beautiful note of a dark rose floating around in there. It is Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. And this probably inspired Antaeus to some effect a little bit here and there. But Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme is an all-time classic. I'm very sad that it's discontinued. By the way, some of these are discontinued and some of them aren't. You can still buy Hugo Boss number one. I don't know what the current version is. But everything else we've talked about so far is discontinued, unfortunately. But there are some coming up that are still available. Some of these are discontinued, some of these aren't. This one, unfortunately, is discontinued. It opens up with myrtle, bergamot, juniper, nutmeg, lavender, and sage, with rose, clove, artemisia, carnation, cedarwood, vetiver, and patchouli. And then you get a leather, musk, and it has this frankincense, smoky labdanum, and sandalwood with this kind of chypre feel. It's basically a leathery, smoky, spicy chypre is how you could describe it. Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. Here, let's do a fresh spray. It's been a little bit since I've worn this. And I've got a couple bottles, thank God. But, oh yeah, just spicy, leathery. And that it feels like a gothic rose. You know what I mean? Like, this is like you're living in a gargoyle castle. Dracula would definitely wear something like this. There's a classiness to it, though, even though it's mysterious and weird and strange, and there's a classiness to it. But yes, deep dark rose. Think about the dark rose that was used. I wouldn't be surprised if Aramis 900, which is also on this list, inspired Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. You know, this is right dab smack in the powerhouse era, and you get that old school masculine spicy accord that, you know, once you smell it, you'll know exactly what I mean. It's the way that the sage and the nutmeg and the clove mixes with those greener. And again, I'm always amazed at the texture of vintage fragrances and how they feel so alive. You know, everything nowadays feels so flat. Even these very heavy amberwood scents where they last for 84 hours on your skin, they don't have the depth of these vintage perfumes to me. And that is really one of the big differences. And every time I think, you know what, maybe am I making too big of a deal about the vintage thing? You know, is it just in my head? Some people think I'm crazy. And then I go back and I smell something like this and I'm like, no, there's nothing like this today. Just, it's just a perfect snapshot in time where the corporations weren't as greedy as they are today. They were using higher quality naturals with a little bit of synthetics, whereas now it feels like they're using a whole shitload of synthetics and just a little bit of naturals, right? If you're lucky. Yeah, just, I mean, such a special time, the 70s and 80s in the perfume world. So that is Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. Okay, next on the list we have an Alain Delon fragrance, basically a celebrity fragrance, and this is called Akitos. Now, Akitos is a Gerard Anthony creation, who I consider to be one of the greatest perfumers of all time. This is my 50 ml. I also have a 100 ml bottle. Again, thank God. But this is, Akitos is a huge, musky, civety, floral fragrance for men. Okay, very, very floral. You get this candied ginger because the mandarin orange makes it feel slightly candied. You know how, if you've ever had candied ginger, you know how it kind of has that coating of sticky resinous coating over the ginger. Imagine candied ginger with the cooling touch of cardamom, kind of cooling it down, almost like a misty take on cardamom. And then you get this beautiful combination of rose, cedar, patchouli, the sandalwood, and the musk, especially the musk in the base. It basically dries down to a musky, civet-y amber. Some people compare this to Parfum de Peau by Montana, the first women's release by the House of Montana. I could see that. The advertisement is brilliant. So this bottle is supposed to look like a snake's head, like it has the shape of a snake's head coming at you, right? And the advertisement is like a plane flying over the jungle, seeing the green aspects of the jungle down below, the foggy green aspects, the snake, the jungle. You get the idea with the marketing campaign. But it's a very musky scent, very musky, and I absolutely love it. It is extremely floral for men. Some men may find it too floral. I love it. Yeah, I love it, and it will get a review very soon on the channel, hopefully. So that is Akitos by Alain Delon. Okay, next on the list of powerful vintage masculine fragrances is number 7, and it's a Paco Rabanne. And no, it's not the one you're thinking, probably. It is Paco Rabanne's Tenere. Now, Tenere is, again, another floral fragrance from the late 80s for men. Akitos came out in 87. Tenere came out in 88, 1 year later. And what we started to see at the end of the 80s was this uptick in extremely floral takes for men. So marketed towards men. But I bet you if you would have put this in a women's bottle a decade before, no one would have batted their eyes. Some of the things that they tried to do to keep the fragrance leaning masculine is they added a note of rosemary, which is usually like this oily green herbal like smell, and it was used in Paco Rabanne pour Homme by the same house a decade before, 15 years or so before this, to great success. Okay, and what's interesting about Tenere to me is it's a creation by the great Pierre Wargnaï. Pierre Wargnaï created many of the all-time great fragrances, but most importantly, he created Hugo Boss #1. And Tenere feels like a flanker of Hugo Boss #1. It feels like a more floral, spicy flanker of Hugo Boss #1. The way that the honey and the tarragon and the artemisia and the orris root and all these very similar notes to what you get in Hugo Boss #1 come together in Tenere. But if you've ever smelled Frédéric Malle's Une Fleur de Cassis, there's a floral note in here that's a mixture of lily of the valley, which is powdery, jasmine, which is here it doesn't smell like the hardcore flowing, everlasting jasmine that is what some folks call the granny jasmine. It doesn't smell like that at all to me. And carnation, which is a masculine note with anise, and then a base of musk, amber, leather, cedar, vetiver, and patchouli. So it smells like, you took a little bit of that honeyed Boss #1 heart and kind of built an entire fragrance around that sort of very special honey accord that Pierre Wargnaï created. And it's beautiful. I mean, it is a beautiful fragrance. Just knocks me on my ass every time I smell it. It's unbelievable. You used to be able to find fragrance bottles of Tenere for very cheap. Not anymore, unfortunately. Prices have kind of skyrocketed with I think more and more people realizing how good some of these vintage fragrances were. And I love this stuff. I mean, it's very spicy, very floral, slightly woody. The anise is a little sharp. The honey accord when it comes through is just brilliant. And then it dries down to a leathery, vetiver, patchouli, woody combination. Very unique. No one will be smelling like Tenere in 2024, I'll tell you that. Or if you do come across somebody smelling of Tenere, they're probably a fragrance nut like you are. So, okay, next on the list is a Dior, and this is Jules. And again, speaking of all-time great perfumers, this is a Jean Martel creation. And so very big thank you to Natalia for securing me a backup of Jules, by the way, at a very fair price. But this is a green leather. Oh my God. I mean, Jean Martel, I think he is, it's a shame he only made 2 fragrances for men before he basically called it quits. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was a health issue or what, but Paco Rabanne pour Homme and Jules, I mean, he basically created 2 of the all-time great fragrances as far as I'm concerned. And Jules is a sort of hardcore green, leathery fougere. It opens up with tarragon, again, one of my favorite secret ingredients, with lavender and cumin. They call it an animalic fougere, and I could see that. But it's almost like a fougere like you've never smelled before. To me, it's totally unique. I think Jules basically translates like to pimp or something, which they'd never name something like that nowadays. Apparently, it's still in production, but according to my brother from another mother, Rich Mitch, from across the pond, he says the new version is not worth it, that they've totally ruined it, basically. You want to go for the vintage if you can. I've never smelled the new version, but that's basically what he said. And it dries down to this beautiful brown, dark, look at the color of the bottle, leather and suede combination, if you will, with a big, of course, textured oak moss. And, these leathery fougères were a big deal in the 80s. And I love wearing them. I love wearing these. It's green enough that I feel like you could wear it pretty much any time, but it probably works best in autumn and winter. Jules, man. What a fragrance. Okay, next on the list we have the great, where are we? Number 9. Number 9 is the great, staying with the House of Dior. This is Dior Fahrenheit from 1988. I don't need to spray this to know what Fahrenheit smells like. This is my 2014 bottle, I believe. But I also have a 90s bottle and an original late 80s bottle. And as far as reformulations go, I really think this is one of the better reformulations. Francois Demachy did justice to Fahrenheit. There was a period of time where Fahrenheit started to smell extremely vanillic in nature in the early 2000s. And I think Francois Demachy kind of fixed that when he came in. And also, this is a good example of some newer fragrance materials coming in and allowing a perfumer to then go in and fix a fragrance that they couldn't use what they used in the late 80s. It's a very leathery, spicy fragrance. It opens up with that gasoline accord, which is so popular, or that barrel note as they call it, but it's that gasoline accord. It smells like you literally spilled gasoline on your hands and wiped it on your pants or something, you know. It's got cedar, lavender, chamomile, mandarin orange, bergamot, hawthorn, lemon, and mace in the top with violet leaf. It's the violet leaf that kind of gives it that ozonic feel. Cedar, nutmeg, sandalwood, carnation, honeysuckle, jasmine, lily of the valley. So if you were paying attention, that was chamomile, carnation, honeysuckle, hawthorn, jasmine, lily of the valley. That's 6 huge floral notes. And most people focus on the gasoline opening and they focus on the leathery dry down because it is a leather fragrance in the end. Maurice Roger and Jean-Louis Suizac are the perfumers. Jean-Louis Suizac is maybe my favorite perfumer of all time. I mean, for what he's done, you think about this, you think about Bel Ami, which is coming up later in the video. You think about Opium, which would definitely be in the women's list video. And you think about OR Black, which easily could have been. By the way, speaking of like an honorable mention just on the fly, this easily could have been on this powerful fragrance video list. So here you go. You get a second honorable mention. This OR Black from the house of Pascal Morabito. The bottle's stunning. You know, he was really into like steel working, like you're working on a building or something. And I mean, it's just deep, leathery, but also it has this beautiful, thick, resinous labdanum. And when I smelled this, I was like, because this is one of the last Jean-Louis Suizacs that I ever purchased, okay? When I smelled this, I was like, what in the hell is wrong with me? Why did I wait so long to get this? I knew I loved Jean-Louis Suizac's work. I think this is I think this is a early 2000s bottle, if I had to guess. I'm not 100% sure. But I think it's an early 2000s bottle. And it is, because the ingredient list, there was like a little cover on the packaging that it came in. And it was a short ingredient list, but it couldn't be too old, I don't think. So I'm not 100% sure. I think it's early 2000s, but I love this stuff. I am head over heels in love with OR Black. So easily could have been on this list. So Jean-Louis Suizac is just a brilliant perfumer. And so with Fahrenheit, many people focus on the leathery accord, which he was a master at making when you think about the leather in Bel Ami and OR Black and Fahrenheit. But many people don't focus on the floral aspects of Fahrenheit. And if you do focus on the floral aspects, you'll realize it actually falls in line with the trend of what was going on. The last couple that I showed, Tenere, Akitos, are great examples of the floral trend in masculine perfumery in the late 80s kind of taking off. And so is Fahrenheit. Even though it doesn't get talked about as a big floral fragrance, it absolutely is. So I love Fahrenheit. I think it's one of the greatest designers ever of all time. So that is Fahrenheit at number 9. Number 10 is, now we're getting into, speaking of all-time great perfumers, now we are getting into fragrances released by Bernard Chant. We've got about 4 in a row here, so get ready. First from 1964, Aramis, which is one of the greatest spicy leathery chypres of all time, in my opinion. I need to review this one of these days, but no one uses aldehydes like, oh God, it's so spicy and deep and dark, you know, and the leather feels like a little bit of Bandy by Robert Piguet from a couple decades before. Aramis from 1964, you know, a big hit of leathery thyme. There's cumin, but it's just the way the aldehydes come together with the spices, I think, that are just phenomenal. There's myrtle, which again, there was myrtle in Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme. There's myrtle here, so you're getting an idea of these leathery chypres having some kind of clarity coming together, and then this big castoreum, mossy, leathery type dry down. I love it. I think Bernard Chant is probably the greatest perfumer for chypres in general, but in particular, well, I would just say in chypres in general. The guy was like a master of chypres. He's basically what Roja Dove wishes he was, you know. He created many of these all-time great chypres. So Aramis from 1964, and then from 1973 we have Aramis 900, which is again a floral chypre and huge deep dark rose. So we talked about two deep dark rose fragrances right here: Van Cleef & Arpels Pour Homme, Aramis 900, two of my all-time favorite rose fragrances marketed towards men. This is rosewood, coriander, green notes, bergamot, lemon, rose, geranium, carnation, jasmine, lily of the valley, orris root, patchouli, oak moss, civet, sandalwood, and vetiver. And you know, sometimes this is a tough wear because the civet is so, you know, but the floral aspect, the rose in here is, it's almost everything. It's green. It can be spicy. It can be deep and dark and red, like the reddest lipstick rose you could imagine. It's so good. I mean, it's such a great creation, but I must admit, sometimes it's so heavy that even that, it's hard for me to wear, and I love big perfume. So Aramis 900. Okay, number 12 is another masterpiece of a fragrance, one of the greatest green chypres ever marketed towards men, in my opinion. This is Devon by Aramis, and this is a green chypre in the 70s. Obviously, 70s started to turn very, very green, thanks to some 1960s releases that were green, like YSLY and a couple others. But this is coriander, green notes, bergamot, rosewood, lemon, rose, geranium, carnation, jasmine, lily of the valley, orris root, patchouli, oak moss, civet, sandalwood, and vetiver. And it just feels so vibrant. You're like you're outside, you know, you're with nature. And oops, actually I was reading Aramis 900, sorry. I was like, that note listing doesn't look right. Aramis Devon is galbanum, mugwort, aldehydes, bergamot, lavender, lemon, orange, stone pine needles, caraway, cinnamon, jasmine, carnation, oak moss, labdanum, leather, cedar, musk, patchouli, and amber. That sounds better. So the galbanum in the top and the mugwort are really what gives it that green aspect. And of course the stone pine needles, very green. And I really think this is what inspired Antoine Lee to create something like Dessandra's. Devon and Dessandra's open up very similar. They go in different directions, but they open very similar. Okay, and the final Aramis fragrance on the list for powerful vintage masculine targeted releases is JHL. And JHL shares some similarities with Cinnabar. It shares similarities with Opium. It shares similarities with Youth Dew, of course. And the story behind this is Joseph Henry Lauder, who was the husband of Estee Lauder, loved these type of perfumes, these Oriental style fragrances, but he didn't want to wear a feminine target release. So this is what the original bottle looks like. They then put it in the collection, the standardized Aramis collection, which I've shown on my channel many times, but this is what the original bottle looked like here, with the gold plaque on the bottom, if you will. And JHL is sort of a take on Youth Dew. It's a take on Opium. It's a take on Cinnabar, marketed towards men. So Joseph Henry Lauder felt more comfortable wearing it out and about, but this was like a bespoke fragrance for him. It's got this big orange line that runs through the middle. Josephine Catapano and Bernard Chant are the two perfumers. And so that orange line makes it feel slightly boozy. If you ever smelled Lagerfeld cologne, which also could have been on this list, you'll kind of get an idea of the orange line, kind of, that was very popular at the time. That came out in the late 70s. Now we're talking 1982. But this stuff lasts forever on my skin. I mean, these big resinous Oriental fragrances last forever. The vanilla, the patchouli, the labdanum, and the cinnamon. It's a very warm, perfect for cold weather. So that is JHL by Aramis. Okay, Next on the list, we have a Halston. So only one Halston on this list, and it's at number 14. Again, this is unranked, but just so I can keep track of what we've done. Number 14 is Halston Limited, and I have to give a special shout out to Frank and then his son Science Bear, who chipped in to buy this bottle for me. Halston Limited is fantastic. It's a little bit sweet. It's got this 80s aldehyde green thing going on in the top with Artemisia, basil, and some bergamot, but it very quickly gets swallowed up by the spices, the smokiness from the frankincense, the castoreum, the oak moss, and this has this big cistus and leather. You know, these two aren't a million miles apart either, or OR Black or Halston Limited. And in fact, I think I prefer the deep dry down of this to Halston Limited. If you go late into the dry down, like 12, 14 hours later, and you can still smell this 12 hours later, but it does turn a little sweet into the dry down because of the cistus labdanum that was used in the amber and benzoin. But outside of the extremely late dry down, which I usually reapply anyways, but that castoreum, leathery, but mixed with the amber, I think this is probably the Halston that most speaks to the style of fragrance that I like to wear. So yeah, and it's probably the heaviest Halston, the most powerful Halston. It's even heavier than Halston 101, which I'm still getting to know, and that's kind of like a unicorn Halston. But yeah, Halston Limited is, I think, the most heavy of the bunch. Spicy, sweet, green, leathery, and ambery. So yes, huge fan of Halston Limited. Okay. Next on the list, we have two Rocco Barocco fragrances, or Rocco Barocco. I don't know how to pronounce it, but the first one is Rocco Barocco Pour Homme, and I think I want to spray this. Give me 1 second. I'm going to need some more little sprayers soon. I'm going to need some more blotters. Okay, so this is Rocco Barocco Pour Homme from 1989. And this is kind of a spicy, floral, leathery chypre. This makes me smile. I love this fragrance. Unfortunately, this one is discontinued. Some of these we talked about recently you can still buy. You can still buy Aramis, the original Aramis. Halston Limited is discontinued. You can still buy Fahrenheit. But this one is almost like the epitome of a dirty, animalic, spicy fragrance. It opens up very herbaceous, with the freshness of neroli, which adds this a little bit of a soapy floral aspect. There's orange blossom and neroli in here, okay? And Egyptian jasmine. So again, we're in the late 80s, 1989. So even though it's marketed towards men, there's a lot of the floral aspects playing along. But instantly, without any messing around, you get the civet coming through. And the civet hits you like a brick. It is right there from the beginning. It mixes with that herbaceous green to almost give off this honeyed feel. Even though there's no honey listed, it reminds me of the way Hugo Boss No. 1 wears. But imagine like even a more floral take on Hugo Boss No. 1. So, which tells me that I think probably an inspiration for Rocco Barocco Pour Homme was something like Tenere, which I mentioned the same perfumer of Hugo Boss No. 1. So I would add a honey note to this, even though it's not listed. They say that it's Tyrolean oak moss, very specific. Maybe that's why they can't make this anymore. The Tyrolean oak moss is no more. And there's some patchouli in the base. But spicy, animalic, floral fragrance for men that is a bomb. I mean, this brand releases fragrances that are huge. And at least the two vintage fragrances that I have. The next one may be even bigger. It is a little bit more well-known in the community than Rocco Barocco Pour Homme. I think Rocco Barocco Pour Homme is a little bit of a hidden gem. Most people don't know about that one. This one's been talked about because of Sebastian. He talked about it on the channel. But this is from 1993, so now we're a couple years later. But what's crazy is this almost feels like it's a couple years behind. It almost feels like it's an earlier release. If you would have asked me to rank them, I would have said this is the early to mid 80s, And I would have said this is like the late 80s, which is correct. It smells like a late 80s fragrance, but this one's called Joint Pour Homme. And if you take a look, it almost has a similarity with the fragrance I saved to the very end because I think it's like the strongest of the bunch. But this one's Joint Pour Homme. And Joint Pour Homme is, yeah, I mean, instantly the difference is you're going to get, there's actually a similarity between the two. I'm not going to lie. There is absolutely a similarity between Pour Homme and Joint Pour Homme. But the difference with Joint is that it adds a lot of green notes from the beginning. They finally admit to the honey in Joint Pour Homme. They add the honey in here. They add the tobacco. So again, remember my mention of Boss Number One with the original. But it's much greener and you know how geranium can sometimes have that sort of spicy green take, but in a floral aspect? That's how the florals feel in here. The florals feel totally different, but the fragrances smell similar. Like they're on the same chassis, if that makes sense. But I love them both. Very happy to have both in the collection. They need to be reviewed and talked about. It's so good. I mean, the depth, the green notes mixed with that civet that punches you in the face with tobacco and honey, and they claim there's ambergris in here. I wouldn't be surprised if in 1993 they very well did put ambergris in a fragrance like Joint. But this was marketed by a couple different distributors. One is called 2P, I believe. Yeah, 2P Parfums. The other one is called Hescanas. I have bottles from both, and I wouldn't worry about one distributor over the other. Just get whatever you can get if you can find a bottle of Joint. Okay. Next on the list is a fragrance from the house of Balenciaga, which I didn't even grab. Where are you? Here you are. And this is called Portitos, which there is a Vintage Hall of Fame review on Portitos. I do think this is one of the greatest takes on Castoreum ever. Oh my God. I mean, this is up there with the all-time great Castoreum uses, if you will. Portitos is... You know, it feels like you're smelling pheromones, even though there's no such thing as human pheromones. It smells like you're smelling human pheromones. There is this, and it's smoky from the beginning, even though you get the green mugwort. The smoky frankincense comes through. You get a little bit of bergamot, a little bit of dry coriander. But, you know, the Castoreum in Portitos smells like you put your hands under your arms or like in between your thighs and your crotch. It definitely has that skin, like I said, pheromone smell without being, there's no such thing as human pheromones. Anyone pimping human pheromones is a bullshitter. But I love this stuff. I mean, I think it is just... the bee's knees. Go check out my full review on the channel for further insight. Okay, next on the list we have Balenciaga Pour Homme at number, where are we? Number 18. Balenciaga Pour Homme. This is the bottle I always show because, well, I've got a couple bottles that are under lock and key that were gifts, and so I always show this one. But Balenciaga Pour Homme. This is also, again, a Gerard Anthony note. And there is a Vintage Hall of Fame review on the channel for those of you who would like to take the plunge and watch some of my vintage content. Oh my God, this is... So, Michael Edwards, who is like a professor, a proper perfume professor, not like me, but a proper perfume professor, he says that this is the first fragrance to ever use oud in the Western side of things. They just didn't put it in the note listing because they figured no one would know what the hell it is. You know, no one used oud outside of Middle Eastern countries in 1990, right? And, you know, Thomas, who used to have a channel called Early Greek, I'm very sad he took it down, but he once made a very convincing point to me. He said, have you ever noticed how stable all of your bottles of Balenciaga Pour Homme are, how they all smell the same? You never get one that's way off, or, you know, and I was like, that's an amazing point. He goes, I bet that's the oud doing that. I said, wow, that's actually a brilliant take. But the patchouli in here mixed with the cinnamon, which is the early 90s cinnamon. If you've ever heard me talk about early 90s cinnamon from stuff like Romeo Jiggly, Uomo, or stuff like that, this has that early 90s cinnamon, which just feels so dense and thick and rich and, oh my God, what a fragrance Balenciaga Pour Homme is. And of course, the Yugoslavian oak moss is to die for. So we've had Tyrolean oak moss, we've had Yugoslavian oak moss. All right, let me wet the old vocal cords. Okay, so next on the list we have Aigner Silver, Hi-Ho Silver, which again, if you think about Balenciaga Portos, all right, and just imagine silver being maybe a little bit more wearable version, a more office-friendly version of Portos. It's got this fennel note, which is missing, but it's still, and they've added spruce. The spruce and the fennel kind of come together, I think, to make it a little bit more green in the top, but it has this spicy animalic feeling of Portos. It's woody. It's got the depth. It's got the smokiness from the frankincense mixing with the castoreum. There's a review of Aigner Silver on the channel as well. Okay, next on the list we have number 20. We have Ted Lapidus Pour Homme. Not Lapidus Pour Homme, but Ted Lapidus Pour Homme. Ted Lapidus Pour Homme. I wonder if this damn pen works. Let me see. This is a badass pen. Kind of. Huh. From 1978, and the damn thing still works. Today, you don't even buy new stuff that works. That is a badass pen. I'm not gonna lie. Look at that. That is just pimpin' since pimpin' been pimpin'. But anyways, Ted Lapidus Pour Homme is kind of the overlooked Lapidus, because everyone talks about Lapidus Pour Homme, which is coming up next. But this is leathery, spicy. It's from the late 70s. 1978, I think, is one of the greatest years in all of perfume. It's mossy, it's spicy. It's got the spruce note from Aigner Silver. And clove. It's smoky, earthy, mossy, castoreum. You're getting the feel. There's a lot of kind of similarities between these very heavy 80s scents, 70s and 80s scents. But this is one that gets overlooked a lot, and I will do a review, an individual review of this bad boy one of these days. So yes, Ted Lapidus Pour Homme from 1978. One of my all-time favorite leathers that nobody talks about. I'm glad to have a bottle. I should have bought a bottle from Rich Mitch. Rich was selling one. He decided he didn't like it, and I was like, fuck, I would take it, but I already had a bottle, and with everything going on, I made a bad mistake. I should have taken it. But I would love a backup of that. Okay, next on the list, number 21, we've got Lapidus Pour Homme from 1987, I believe. And you talk about everything in the kitchen sink. It's got lavender, pineapple. No, it doesn't smell like Aventus. This is the OG pineapple, long before Aventus used pineapple. Basil, bergamot, juniper, tarragon, lemon, honey. And again, Boss Number One's probably influenced this a little bit because it has that honeyed aspect. Although you could make the case that maybe the honey and Koros influenced Boss Number One. So who knows? But it does feel like it has that Boss Number One style animalic honey here with orris, caraway, jasmine, lily of the valley, rose, petitgrain, pine, rosewood, musk, tonka bean, amber, patchouli, sandalwood, tobacco, oak moss, and cedar. Martine Gras is the perfumer here. And this is a perfect example of a powerful vintage 80s fragrance. But the thing about Lapidus Pour Homme is, even though it lasts all day, it'll last literally all day on me. You spray this on in the morning, you'll smell it in the evening before bed. The problem is, or the one of the positives is, you will not smell it on your clothes a week or two later. Like, for example, what I was saying with Promise. You will not smell something like this weeks later. The materials they were using were so different back then. It's crazy. Even though I do love Promise, I'm not going to lie. And there's a review on Promise on the channel as well now. So slowly chipping away. So that's number 21. Number 22 is one of my favorite honeyed patchoulis of all time. It's Giorgio Beverly Hills for men. I love this stuff. I get a similarity to Givenchy Gentleman from 74, which we'll talk about very soon. Giorgio Beverly Hills. So, rumor is this is now, come on, baby, don't do that. There we go. Scared me for a little bit there. Whew. I mean, this is an old bottle. The newer bottle's juice almost looks green instead of brown. Oh my God, this is so good. Oh, I love that sort of honeyed patchouli take on Giorgio Beverly Hills. It's fruity, so there's almost like fruits that have been covered in honey, molasses-like honey. It's aldehydic. You get this pimento orange accord, like I was talking about the orange accord that runs through Lagerfeld Cologne, which I think popularized that orange accord running through the center. You saw it in JHL. You see a little bit of it in Giorgio for men. But what ends up coming through is this patchouli that has facets of the orris root, the powdery facets of patchouli, the green spicy facets of carnation, the thickness of cinnamon, and then woods, more honey, oak moss, and a big, huge patchouli. Just a giant ambery benzoin patchouli in the base. I adore Giorgio Beverly Hills for men. I really think that this style of patchouli, when you talk about Givenchy Gentleman, which is coming up, Giorgio Beverly Hills, Pavarotti, Moss Brex, I mean, those style of patchouli is really my personal favorite way to use patchouli, the way they did it back in the day like this. Very sad this is discontinued. Very, very sad. What a fragrance they had on their hands there. Giorgio Beverly Hills from 1984. Okay, number 23 is a fragrance from the house of Leonard, and this is called Leonard Pour Homme. Now, Leonard Pour Homme is done by the great Ron Winograd, who did Lagerfeld Cologne, which I've referenced a couple times. He also did the fragrance I'm saving till the very end because it's such a giant monster, rip paint off the walls, give zero fucks fragrance. But he didn't do a lot. Again, he only did a handful of fragrances. He did Lagerfeld Classic, he did this, and he did one more we're going to talk about later on. But Ron Winograd, very similar to what I was saying about the guy who did Jules, which was Jean Martel. I really wish he did more stuff because at this rate, my God, man, my God. This is one of the few. Leonard is a very interesting house. They, for some reason, put an actual carrot note in in many of their perfumes, and you might be thinking, okay, so they put carrot seed in there. No. This is straight up carrot. There's a carrot note in here. You know, carrot seed gives off this sort of chalky powderiness that reminds people of iris. This is a very earthy creation. So it starts out. It's literally like basil, thyme, herbal, aromatic notes, green, herbal, aromatic notes, vetivers, but imagine in the dirt, right? Like you're digging them out of the dirt. Beautiful, herbaceous, sort of herbal lavender with marjoram, cinnamon, jasmine, patchouli, vetiver, iris, artemisia, carnation, cedarwood, frankincense, leather, amber, castoreum, moss, musk, and labdanum. You get the idea. This is a classy scent. Even though it lasts forever on my skin, and it is very powerful, it's also classy. I could easily wear this with a suit. Easily, I could wear this with a suit. I love these type of fragrances. This came out in 1980. And just one of my all-time favorites from the past that doesn't get the love it deserves. So that is Leonard pour Homme at number 23. Number 24 is probably the greatest Dunhill fragrance of all time. This is Blend 30. And Blend 30 is an absolute beast. It's sort of it's got some fougere aspects to it. It's lavender, clary sage, rosemary, lemon, bergamot. Neroli adds a little bit of brightness to it, but it dries down to this sort of texturized, well, I would say like crispy. Imagine like the grass in the autumn when it's really dry around Halloween, and it's not going to be green until the next spring. And sometimes you step on it and it has that crinkly like feel. It's got this hay sweetened by a little bit of tonka bean, but it's smoky. You know, there's some smoky aspects to it. It's spicy, it's smoky, and it's just an amazing take on a tobacco hay like dry down in the shape of a fougere. It is one of my all-time favorite fragrances. Definitely my favorite Dunhill, but one of my all-time favorites. That's Blend 30. Okay, next on the list we have number 25, and this is a leathery take on a fougere. Probably my favorite example of a leathery fougere. I don't have the note listing. There's no note listing on Parfumo. This is a really, I would say, under the radar leathery fougere. You could also turn to something like number 12 by Jean Coutier. But I think Perrac Pour Homme is more powerful. Number 12 is still a great fragrance. Probably could have been on this list, but yes, this is the more powerful of the two. Oh my God. It is absolutely phenomenal. How I waited so long to find a bottle of this, I'll never know. It's everything I love. You know, it's got, it almost feels like it has a little bit of the anise, like this alcoholic anise structure from Azzaro Pour Homme. I'm sure there's a beautiful floral heart in there, but really it's the leathery bits in the base that I end up getting a lot of leathers, a lot of oak mosses, and I would assume some castoreum as well to make that leather accord, which adds this warming feeling to it, you know, this metallic warmth to the base. Perrac Pour Homme is fantastic. Very, very lucky to find a bottle at a reasonable price. Okay, next on the list we have number 26, and this is Lancetti Uomo. Again, speaking of amazing leathers, this is one of my all-time favorite leather fragrances that very few people talk about. Oh, so Lancetti Uomo is an absolute beast. It's funny because when I got this, the person sent me 2 bottles at a very, very reasonable price. You'll find some bottles that are outrageous, but neither of these was ever used at all. They were completely full. And the guy, when he sent it on the packing slip, he put old cologne as if it was just throwaway. Old cologne, just take it, $30 or whatever it was. And when I got this, I was like, wow. It's got white thyme, very similar to the way that the white thyme is used in something like Invasion Barbare, right, by MDCI. That has white thyme, but here it's got a lot of heavy resinous green notes. So you get absinthe, you get galbanum, and you get mint, and the mintiness of the leather makes it very unique. A little bit like the original Burberry's for Men from 1981 or whenever it was. I think they re-released it in 92, the Burberry's for Men, the original Burberry. But this has all of these animalic notes. It's woody, it's leathery. The sandalwood in the base is phenomenal. They claim there's real ambergris in here, but if you're a leather lover and you like spicy, woody fragrances with depth, the green depth in the top, the citruses actually show through, the dry, sweaty clary sage, it's all here. It's amazing. I'll review this one of these days, but if you can find this at a reasonable price, go for it. Okay, Speaking of hard to find fragrances, number 27 is Hashish Men for men. Hashish Men, or Hashish Homme. It was originally called Hashish Homme. And this is issued by a house called Vijaga. Vijaga. Very little known about these fragrances. I found a flanker which I wasn't as enamored with yet. I need to wear it properly. But Hashish Homme is unfortunately discontinued. One of my favorite takes on a spicy fragrance I've ever smelled. You know, it's spicy, it's woody, it is sort of the epitome for me of spicy, smoky, green. It's got the floral heart you would expect from something released in 1983 for men. Just amazing stuff. And it dries down to this thick, tarry labdanum and castoreum and leather and moss and frankincense. So it's smoky, spicy, leathery. I love Hashish Homme. We'll definitely get a Vintage Hall of Fame review. Oh, okay. Next on the list. Let me just mark this blotter. Okay, next on the list we have Salvador Dali Pour Homme, which is a Thierry Wasser creation, interestingly enough. And if you can just imagine this, if you can just imagine this fougere take with this sort of civet-y base like in Koros. If you can just imagine the way the civet acts in Koros, but stick it on this sort of more traditionally take on a fougere. I think Koros is much closer to a fougere than a chypre anyway. There's always this debate, what is Koros, right? But if you can just imagine moving Koros more to the fougere category, if that makes sense. The lavender in here, the anise, the basil, the moss, and one of the secret ingredients that Thierry Wasser used here that is not very commonly used in these type of masculine fragrances. This is from 1987, I believe. Yes, 1987. And this is one you can still buy. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the vintage, but you can still buy this. As he added this heliotrope note, which adds this spongy-like texture to the fragrance. I love Salvador Dali Pour Homme. And yes, this will definitely get a Vintage Hall of Fame review one of these days. Okay, next on the list we've got number 29, which is Moschino Pour Homme. This is basically an oily Italian leather. It's a take on Bel Ami. Very oily to me. And there is orris and leather combination, which basically, if you've noticed a lot of these, they will use orris root or iris in some manner to kind of round out the leather a little bit. I love that, but this is very spicy, very leathery. There's a waxiness to this scent though. There's like this wax paper feel to the leather. Unfortunately, this is discontinued as well, but this came in 1990 and definitely inspired by what I would consider to be one of my favorite fragrances of all time, and this is Bel Ami. So next on the list we have number 30, Hermes Bel Ami, which I consider to be one of, if not the greatest spicy, leathery fragrances of all time. Every time I smell this, it's almost like a swoon. I want to wear it. I think it's one of the greatest pieces of work I've ever smelled for a designer. You know, and the carnation in here, this is a great take on carnation, and it shows why carnation can be used for men. This is a great example. You get the citruses in the top. Everything is in its place here is the thing. So the cedar is so rich and deep, like you're just seeing generation after generation living their lives at the same sort of cedar wood table that has soaked in all of this history, and now it's your turn to sit at the cedar wood table, and you're there, and it's smoky and deep And you can see kind of the edges, the scars, the nicks in the wood, and the carnation in here is, I mean, so, like, sometimes when you smell actual carnation absolute, it smells like you're smelling the leaves and stems blended up with the spicy flower, right? And that's exactly what this smells like. It really is one of the epitomes of a carnation, but the star of the show is the leather. The way that they did the leather in the base is so realistic. You know, it's like you're in the most expensive car you can imagine. You have the wood grain, and that's the smoky cedar, smoky woodiness, but then you have that leather, the leather feels like you can just literally see the lines. You know how I showed, if you watched my live stream yesterday, I showed EO number one, and EO number one has the leather sort of pouch that the bottle sits in that was made by the great Habib Dingle, who unfortunately passed away. But he made the Bible for Pope John Paul II. He made the sort of like leather cover that went on his Bible, and inside of that leather, there are all of these marks and scars, and you know, you can see the defects on the animal, right? You can see the defects on the animal, um, and that's what this feels like. It feels like you can get the smokiness from the wood, but all in one place, all in one enclosed area. You know, Bel Ami means beautiful friend. It was also the name of a boat, a very famous boat of an author who wrote a book. There's a whole backstory on it. Um, but you know, my uncle had this boat, and it always reminds me of going down underneath the deck. There was this area where, you know, think about it being enclosed, right? And there were some leather seats. There were some sort of woody wood panels, old wood panels. That's what Bel Ami reminds me of. So good. I love wearing this stuff. I'll never forget one day I was in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and traveling, and I went into a gas station because I had to get gas, and the lady was like, "What in the world are you wearing?" And I was like, "Hermes Bel Ami," and she was like, "Hermes? What in the hell is that?" And I was like, "Don't worry about it." but but yes, Bel Ami is an all-time great. And then you go from one all-time great to another. Chanel Antaeus. I really don't even have to spray this. It is the epitome for me of Chanel class with that castoreum note, which I absolutely love. It's classy, but it's dirty. It's got one of the best contrasts in the game. There's an entire Vintage Hall of Fame review on Chanel Antaeus. And it is, for me, if you said, Ramsey, you get to keep maybe a couple fragrances, I could easily just take these and go away, you know, and I'd be fine. I would be absolutely fine. So that is Chanel Antaeus at number 31. Number 32 is staying with Chanel. This is Egoist, but not just any Egoist. Egoist Cologne Concentré, which is basically their way of saying the eau de parfum. But this is heavier, thicker, richer. It's deeper. It's definitely Egoist, but more. And I love the cologne concentrate. It's getting very hard to find. Mahogany wood, rosewood, coriander, mandarin orange, cinnamon, carnation, rose, sandalwood, tobacco, vanilla, amber, and leather. Jacques Polge and Francois Demachy were the two perfumers. So yes, this will definitely get a review on the channel one of these days. And then we move on to the final three. And I put these three at the end for a reason. Technically, this is an unranked list, but these are my favorite some of my favorite powerful fragrances. If I was really ranking this more in terms of the most powerful, probably things like Rocco Barocco Joint would be closer to the top of the list. But these last three are easy last three for me. First of all, we've got Givenchy Gentleman, which is probably my favorite take on patchouli. Well, I know it is. I put it as my favorite take on my top 22 patchouli video that I did. To close out 2022, I did a top 22 patchouli video. And this is Honey bergamot, cinnamon, lemon, rose, patchouli, cedar, jasmine, orris root, patchouli, ant leather, oak moss, musk, amber, vanilla, and vetiver. Paul Leisure is the perfumer. Definitely my favorite honeyed patchouli of all time. It's that scratchy old school patchouli as well. I love this stuff. I will do a full review, and if you can find one of these bottles with the wraparound, do it. Absolutely do it. It's worth every penny. Just a phenomenal masculine scent. And then, of course, at number 34, how could you do a most powerful vintage masculine fragrance video without talking about Kouros? Kouros is, I think, one of the greatest designer fragrances ever released. Just for YSL to have the balls to put something like this out. Imagine as a designer house. I don't even have to smell it. I can just smell the stain around the outside of the atomizer. It looks like Kouros just took a piss all over the outside of the atomizer and just stained his pants and is like, fuck it, going out. I'm going out anyways, boys. Oh my God, and it's so unbelievably good. It's that crazy contrast between that pissy, sort of, I don't want to say feral, but there is definitely something that feels like it's kind of deep inside of your brain, like it's lodged inside of your head, like you can't get away from it. It's instinct, There's something, that undertow pulling you, and it's the combination of cleanliness and dirtiness. And the civet, there is honey in here, which very well may have been one of the influencers for something like Boss Number One, but Pierre Bourdon, absolute master at creating contrast, and the contrast between the spicy and the dirty in Kouros is legendary. And just think that came from a designer house, which is just crazy to me. Just goes to show how far YSL and designers have fallen. And number 35 really, but if I was ranking it, this very well may be number 1 for me. But maybe I'll come back and rank these one day if I'm bored. But this is Furio by Jacques Bogart. This is one of the strongest, rip paint off the walls, gouge your eyes out. One of my buddies made a joke that you could power the Eastern Seaboard for a week with 1 bottle of Kouros. It is just so strong and powerful. And, the stuff lasts forever. But it's also beautiful to me, the way that the ambrette, which adds this musky, liqueur-like feel to the musk, mixes with the carnation and the geranium and the jasmine, and of course the civet and the oak moss. There's definitely some similarities between Furio and maybe Rocco Barocco pour Homme. Right, this came out 1 year later. I could see some similarities. Also, even joint. If you look at the bottle colors, there are some similarities there. But this is stronger to me. This is one of the strongest fragrances I've ever smelled in my life. It is. Now, if you're smelling things like Promise and the Amber Woods and comparing it, then obviously that's different. But for its day, this is one of the strongest masculine fragrances I've ever smelled. The most tenacious, the strongest. And I'll do a review on Furio one of these days. But even the new, if you can find a bottle, it's discontinued, okay? But if you can find a bottle, Fragrance X or Fragrance Net or FragranceBuy.ca used to have bottles for like $20 or something. You can find a bottle, grab a couple just to have for the collection. It's worth it, trust me. It's worth it. The way that the spices and the ambrette, the muskiness of the civet and the musk and the amber and everything come together is amazing. And it's a Ron Winograd and Thierry Vasser. One of Thierry Vasser's best works. And then he gets to Guerlain, and they have him do shit like Tobacco Honey, which, I think they're just wasting his skills. But hey, that's modern corporate America. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the list. It's a bitch talking for an hour and 15 minutes straight. So I hope you guys enjoy this. As always, it's a pleasure to do the videos for you guys. Let me know what your favorite powerful vintage masculine fragrances are. And we will see each other soon. Cheers. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.